that by 2005, and that indeed there is need for restitution of that heritage because it denies the people and the community an opportunity to experience Nok art, which is located in the global north. We were also able to listen to Dr. Silayo Ameriki from Tanzania, who shared with us a perspective from his country and the importance of building, policy frameworks and so on that facilitate the restitution and the need to learn from each other. He brought in the question about learning from Namibia and the involvement of communities. I think that debate was picked by Dr. Purity Kiora, who really argued that we do need to bring communities into the discussion and that this should not be seen to be something that is done externally without community engagement. And then, of course, we ask the question, how do you bring communities onto the table when the communities themselves may not have the skills required to demand the restitution? And I think this is something that we really do need to pick up today so that we can find possible ways of engaging with the communities and helping them, make the required demands. So that was that critical perspective. We had hoped to listen to Shifaro Tadese from Ethiopia, but because of the situation in Ethiopia, she was not able to join us, and I have been following her situation, and we know that it's of course very tight out there. But we did listen to Omar Balde from Morocco, who argued that there might be a possibility to learn from Morocco and the possibility of the museums and the storage of the cultural heritage, how to take good care of it, and so forth and so on. And of course, he also did mention that there is ongoing disappearance of cultural heritage through tourism. And I think that is also something that we need to reflect on. And then we wrapped it all up yesterday with Njeri Gashihi, who talked about the shield which anchors her community and the inspiration that she has to pursue its repatriation, not just because of its symbolic importance, but also the fact that it carries the philosophy of the community that used it in the pre-colonial days. So in a sense, therefore, from yesterday, it was quite clear that the issue of restitution is an issue that has social, cultural, economic, and political significance, and that we have a responsibility from the continent to debate these issues and to come up with multiple approaches to address it in a wholesome manner, other than, in a manner that seems to conflict and so on, so that we should have clarity of the message as we make the demands for Africa. I did also mention that part of the Agenda 2063 is the anchoring of arts and culture in the in the continental development trajectory, and that it is important for us to also reflect on how the African Union Commission and other organs that are Pan-African, whether it is NEPAD, whatever continental bodies we have, what role they can actually play, and also the regional bodies, whether it's ECOWAS, the East African Community, SADC, and so forth, and so on. So that was a very lively debate yesterday, and today we will continue with it, and we will pick perspectives again from different parts of the continent, and we will be listening to Kiza Wilson. Now, Kiza Wilson works with a community-based organization in Uganda, and he is executive director of the Bugungu Heritage and Information Center, which has established a community museum and heritage library in Bulisa, Uganda, and which undertakes heritage education in schools and communities. He is a Ugandan human rights defender who is extremely passionate about the rights of indigenous minority groups and promoter of earth-just jurisprudence. He continues to document the history and cultural heritage of the Bagungu people, one of the indigenous communities of Uganda. So that is going to be the point of entry for Kiza Wilson. And then after that, we'll be listening to Mohanad Gasag El Sagari, from Egypt. Mohanad is a freelance journalist and writer with numerous publications on social and environmental issues. Most of those publications are available in Egypt as well as in Europe. And since 2011, he's been really involved in social and environmental activism in Uganda, in Egypt, and used to be head of media for imprint movement in Egypt. And it's really a pleasure to meet Mohanad, who is in fact a journalist based in Egypt, and who is also contributing to the publication of perspectives from that part of the world. We will then move on to Benedict Tembo, who is an editorials editor with the Zambia Daily Mail, and who is also very actively involved in sports journalism and creativity and mentorship and so on. And he will be talking about a particular case in Zambia, which is of particular interest to us. And we'll wrap it up with Juma Ondeng, who is within the area of cultural heritage and international development, and who's been working with the National Museums of Kenya as keeper of antiquities, sites, and monuments, and is currently based in Western Kenya. His most recent engagement relates to the International Inventories Program, and I know he's extremely passionate about cultural heritage restitution, and again, we'll be listening to him. We'll also recognize the presence of a lot of other people who are in the room today. I am so happy to see my brother Kalundi Serumaga in the room, with whom I have worked before, and who is extremely passionate about indigenous knowledge systems and the ways in which we can do more work with culture and so on. I will also be calling on Abdikadir Kurewa, who is going to be sharing with us, a potential framework for restitution, something that is work in progress, which we need to fast track. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the team that will be guiding us today. And of course, we will have a lot of opportunities for interaction. So I want to start with Kiza Wilson, who will share with us the case of the Bunyoro Kitara and the whole question of restitution and the things that were stolen from the kingdom. So Kiza, if you can step in, that will really be a great thing for us. Kiza Wilson, please.
Thank you very much, Professor, and everyone listening in this morning. I'm also happy to be in the same forum with Mr. Serumaga. I have only met his work. I have not met him physically, but he's good at what he does. My name is Kiza Wilson, as Professor said, and I run a community-based organization that I founded after knowing that no one was giving attention to a minority group that I belong to. So I come from a minority group called Bagungu, found in Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. At Bagungu Heritage, we document our culture and history as Bagungu people. We have a community library and a museum that we set up in order to collect artifacts portraying our culture as the Bagung people. We also make sure that young people coming up know about themselves. We have a heritage education program which in schools. To go back to what we are talking about,
Did we just lose Kiza?
sorry.
Kiza, are you back?
Hello.
Yes, please come back.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, with technology. I was saying Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom is one of those kingdoms in East Africa which suffered from so many colonial injustices. Like my own Eastern
Kiza, I think you might be having a problem with your connection. Maybe you want to stay close to your mic. Just try one more time, because I'm not sure whether it is the connection or your distance. Check that again.
He's muted. I think he's inadvertently muting himself.
Okay, Bronson, can you keep Kiza completely unmuted for now? Unmute him.
Yes, I'm really sorry for the technical glitch that happened. I think Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom is one of those. Am I clear now? Am I clear now? Hello.
Yes, you are clear. You are clear, Kiza. Proceed. Continue.
Okay. So I think Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom suffered from colonial injustice. One of them being part of areas being evacuated. The population was moved in what was termed as sleeping sickness. Sleeping sickness problem. Unfortunately, really what makes some of us doubt the sleeping sickness theory is that my own people, the Bagung, were moved in 1909, but in 1913, the land was turned into a conservation area, what is today Makizon Falls National Park. So Bunyoro's Bunyoro fought very many wars with colonial governments until when the king was captured. The Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom king was captured and exiled. So today that may not be our major topic. Our major topic is our main area of concern is the stolen artifacts. And during in 1894, the Omukama Kabalega, or the King Kabalega of Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, was invaded at his palace, and that began the looting of the artifacts. So one of the items which were taken was the drum, the royal drum. The significance of this drum is that during coronation of the king, it was very important because it is believed to release 3 voices at the same time. So this was taken, and it is believed that it is in United Kingdom at Oxford University. The other important artifacts which was taken were the royal spears, whereas these normal spears are called amachumu among these people. These particular ones, because of their royal attachments, are called the amahango. So these spears provided king with the security. Whenever he went, he moved with some of them. So when he was attacked, colonial government, colonial administrators led by Captain Rastron took away those artifacts, including, most importantly, Nyamiaro, the wooden stool. Nyamiaro is a throne for the kingdom. So all these artifacts were never returned. So up to now, all the endeavors to have them returned have been futile. When University of Oxford was reached out by the kingdom, they said what they have are really duplicates, and they were donated by a prince from another kingdom. So Nyamiaro was sat on during adjudication of cases. Whenever king would be settling conflicts, mostly he presided over cases related to land and livestock, because that was the major source of livelihood. So whenever he was presiding over the cases, he sat on that. So, and he also sat on it at least at every new moon. So historians, some historians have said by taking these royal regalias, UK government took the kingdom, took Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, and to them, most all kings who were installed or enthroned after this incident did not really, are not considered as real kings, because the real instruments were taken. Maybe to show you that this was intentional, when British took those items, they installed their own king in Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. So they installed their puppet in order to serve their interest. This was against the cultural setup of the kingdom, because the other king who was disposed was still alive. So by the British installing their own king, that went against the cultural setup of the kingdom. And it shows that these people did background studies to know what are the instruments of powers in the kingdom. So after that, that's when they had to take these instruments and to have their own king. Why we need them more? Why do we need these things returned? I will begin with what Dr. Valence said yesterday. Dr. Valence said that by returning these artifacts to Africa, we are bringing back dignity. We are returning dignity, not just artifacts. And to me, if we bring back these artifacts, we shall be bringing back kingship. We shall be bringing back power and authority of this once a powerful kingdom. bring them back also will help people come to terms with their own collective memory, because some of them have been hearing about this. So by physically seeing them when they are repatriated, it will really bring back that memory. They will celebrate their histories and identities. And this will also enable them pass on the same to their children. Maybe on what should be done, on what really should be done before or after these artifacts are returned, we should make sure that our people, both communities, researchers, academicians, should appreciate the artifacts we are already having, because we have had a scenario where we tend to look at museums, we tend to look at all cultural spaces as places for the tourists. So we need to bring on board our own people to appreciate this, because even if we bring them back without people appreciating them, our efforts will be going to waste. Then drawing from Bunyoro Kitara, there is an association called Bunyoro Kitara Repatriation Agency. One challenge that they have always faced is that they have tended to treat injustices. They have tended to engage UK government without really engaging the cultural institution who are the custodians of these those artifacts which were looted. So when we are advocating for returns of these agencies, artifacts or items, we need to really engage cultural institutions, since they are the main custodian, they are the main stakeholders in this struggle, in the cultural heritage business. With Bunyoro, it has been said that UK government compensated Bunyoro for the injustices they committed. However, neither the central government nor the kingdom has acknowledged receiving this compensation. The closest the government has come to the mention of the compensation was that the money has been used to build roads in Bunyoro. So we need also to, we need to interest younger people in this debate. We need to bring people, young people on, in this debate of repatriation and restitution, so that we know there's sustainability. For now, I can stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kiza, for that. And also just mentioning again that the thing that came out yesterday about restoring the dignity of our communities and the dignity of our people through, giving them back that which was stolen from them. I also like, you concluding remark on the importance of bringing together the youth so that the youth also see value in this debate, so that it's not a debate that is an academic debate, but it's actually also an intergenerational debate. And the need to go beyond government to other institutions. So it's really multi-stakeholder, multi-platform, multi-sectoral engagement, and that the symbolic importance of the royal drum, the symbolic importance of the royal spears, and so on. Again, as we heard yesterday, these things are valuable not just because they have commercial value, but that they do have identity value, they have social value, and so on, and as well as points of reference for our community. So thank you very much, Keys Wilson, for that perspective from Uganda. I also want to recognize the presence of a lot of other people who have joined us today. The founding editor of Jahazi Journal, Garnet Olunya, is here with us, and thanks a lot, Garnet. Thanks, Dr. Purity Cura, again for joining us today, Jerry, and our colleagues from other parts of the continent. At this moment, I would like us to go to Egypt to have a perspective from Mohamed El Sangari, who is, as we said, a freelance journalist who is very, very involved in the social and environmental activism in Egypt, who will share with us a perspective related to the Egyptian queen who is presiding over a European capital in forced exile. Mohamed, this is your opportunity to share with us your perspective from Egypt, as well as actually other ideas that you might have about this whole debate. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamani. And I am privileged and humbled to call everyone here colleagues. Your perspective and knowledge have truly enriched mine. Of course, like hearing like the different perspectives and different stories from each of the participants, there is a colonial undertheme to and it is at the heart of the cultural restitution issue. The tying to that, before I talk specifically about Nefertiti's head and the story as an example, for example, a couple of months back, I was in Germany, and like with some well-meaning friends on the topic of culture, and some meaning friends, like I'm not gonna name any names or NGOs. One of them worked for a very well-known NGO before, and there was an announcement for a position in her NGO that she's a senior position she was supposed to hire, and then she got the CVs from HR. It's an international position, so anyone could apply. She got the CVs from the human resources department, and then she went through the CVs and said, like, why are there no applicants from Africa in the CV? And the HR actually responded to her saying, oh no, there are lots of CVs, we just wanted to filter them, and we thought like they don't have a European working culture. Like, so they don't have European working culture, so you just literally filter them out even before selection. For saying, and that's ironic, like if they don't want our culture or they think our culture, like why the hell keep it? You know what I mean? In that regard, as if the same, like here I'm talking about pieces, but there are people that were talking about also the restoration of the dead, and so on, which is like even at looking at the current political landscape. So like no, like you're keeping the culture, you're basically keeping our dead, but you don't want the living because they will negatively impact your culture. No, it's kind of ironic, like how it all plays out like, in their heads, in all our heads actually, because it just doesn't just like influence them; it influences us as well, because it's a cycle. And in any case, referring to Egypt in particular, it's hard to tell how many pieces of antiquities were stolen from Egypt because of the massive number of antiquities in Egypt throughout so many eras, not just talking about the ancient Egyptian one, ancient Egyptian, Greco-Roman period, like early like Arab Islamic period, and so on, to the point that it became very difficult actually to tell at one point if some pieces were missing because there were so many of them. And of course, because of colonialism, and Egypt was a British colony for over like 70 years, technically since under British control since 1988, but formally since 1914. So the British actually did form the modern laws, or the core of the modern laws for preserving antiquities in Egypt. Going back like to the main topic of my discussion, the one that I was talking about, Nefertiti's head or Nefertiti's bust as an example. So basically, in 1912, a German expedition discovered this tomb, which is in an ancient city, or what used to be in the ruins of what used to be an ancient city, which has a specific value because like the founder of the city, Akhenaton, and also like the husband of Nefertiti, is known probably to be the first person who called for worshiping single god before other religions. He was shunned and outcast after he died, but he has a huge historical significance. While they were doing the digs there, they discovered at the workshop of his main artist, they discovered this bust along like this gorgeous, super well sculpted. Like the details are impeccable. I'm sure many of you are aware of Nefertiti's bust, but the artistry is just like something out of this world. So during like at the time, according to the laws of the British put for the division of antiquities, because at the time, if you had an expedition or if you did an expedition, you were allowed to keep part of your find, as long as you have to prove it's not unique, it's kind of redundant, and it has to be inspected. It has to be inspected at the Egyptian Museum at the time by British authorities, not even Egyptian authorities. But what the German archaeologist did, Ludwig Burchard, he basically forged a paper. He basically wrote it off as a mundane find, and even after writing off as a mundane find, even according to the laws which were colonial to begin with, even according to those laws, it should have went to the Egyptian Museum, was inspected there, and then came back to and then went back to division. However, they decided, but records show, and not even like Egyptian records, German and Austrian records from the period showed that the bust never left the camp. Was Ludwig, and it actually, and then he took it with him outside, and then it went to the to the vault of the person who funded the expedition, Jack Simmons, and it stayed there for like 11 years until the significance, or basically the European craze with everything that's ancient Egyptian came out in 1922 after the discovery of the Tutankhamun tomb. After Howard Carter, who also, by the way, is regarded as a great archaeologist, and he might be, but he was literally a tomb raider. They found lots of antiquities that he stole from Egypt as well. After Howard Carter made that find in 1922, and started like the craze with Egyptology around Europe and around the world. So when that happened, basically the Germans, to counter the British King Tut, they started creating a display around the Queen Nefertiti's bust. Kind of like counteract. You can also look at like the politics at the time actually being part of it. And then once it came out, like what the Germans had, and the Egyptian government started calling for it to return to Egypt multiple times since British occupation. Basically, even then, Egyptian governments were calling for the bust return to Egypt. But throughout like the different German governments, and Hitler himself, who was known to have like an affinity to Nefertiti's bust, that I think like he almost literally said like the Queen will never leave Germany or something to that effect. He didn't go, but of course then World War II happened, and then Germany was moved under like the Allied command for a while, the Egyptian government started talking again to the Allied command at the time, which told them like, we can't decide on this. You have to wait for an elected German government with the power to decide on it, which like they did, and also they started calling for the return of the head again, but they refused the return. And it continued till this day. You can see that this has been like so many decades and so many attempts. There were lots of notable attempts. There were lots of like, because under international law, this is theft. It was an item. It was an item that was mislabeled and that was smuggled out of Egypt as something else, something with huge significance, even under the laws which at the time were not even fair, were colonial laws. Even with these standards, it is still a crime, and this is still a smuggled, very important antiquity. And as the time went on, and Egypt, like, ironically, when they started displaying it, and they made like the entire like new display like basically around Nefertiti's head in Berlin, in the Nazi Museum, it started turning gradually. Nefertiti is one of Berlin's symbols. Literally, like if you find like you'll find her on T-shirts along with the Berlin like bird and like the others, like you'll find her as a symbol, and it feels strange, like as someone as an Egyptian who visits Berlin and feel like, I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but you know, like claiming it's an international heritage. Anyway, I believe everyone has the right and should have like the access to international cultural heritage. But also, I believe this culture, this heritage belongs back home, where all the world can see and enjoy. And even part of like there were multiple attempts to restore the bust, which failed. And I think in 2006, the Egyptian head of antiquities at the time, Zahi Hawass, after like doing multiple attempts to get back the head, which were refused by the successive German governments, there was a new museum that was going to be opened near the ruins of the city, where they discovered the head, and he requested it on loan for 3 months, just a loan for 3 months for the German government. And the German government refused. The experts it cited were afraid that you were going to damage it during transportation. So you see how like condescending, and how so till this day, if you wanna enjoy like seeing like in Nefertiti's like and it's truly a magnificent piece of art, regardless of like the huge historical value. If you want to see it in person, you'll have to go, to Berlin and view it. An option most of us do not even have. Continuing the thing, like we need to do, like speaking with you, with interested colleagues, and so on. We do need to build a strong Pan-African network that can support each other, like in different levels. Like there are academics, there are people working in media, there are people that are scientists that are specialized. I believe it's very important for us to be able to build a network, support each other through it, and to build more momentum for restoring our stolen pieces of heritage. And like I thank you very much, Professor Kimani, and like my colleagues, because this is a movement in the right direction. And I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult not to like in a naive outlook, and we still have to get lots of traction and movement, and we do have to get like backing, or even like back our own government in the initiatives or provide them with support in the initiatives to restore. So, but I believe this is a great step, and thank you very much, Shishia, for organizing it.
Thank you, Mohanad, for this. It's really, really important, and you do mention the challenges that we face, even as researchers and people who want to get a sense of pre-colonial, the pre-colonial Africa, that we have to travel. And you raise a very important question. If they don't value our culture, why are they keeping it?
Exactly.
So you don't want us, but you want our heritage. You want to keep our heritage. You reject us. You reject the living, people, but you want to keep our ancestors and the creativity of our people in your museums and so on. I think that those questions you're asking, very, very important questions. And finally, of course, you do raise the importance. You do raise the issue of the importance of building a Pan-African movement to be asking these questions in a consistent and in a unified way. So I really want to thank you for sharing your perspective with us, and I'm sure that we'll be following up a little more. Comment: someone interacted with the Queen, and I can also see another comment related to the Book of the Dead, and so on. And I think that again,
I really sorry that Rad, I really like this comment. Like, we are more yes, we prefer dead than alive. That's definitely that's definitely a thing. Like, we're more valuable like dead than alive.
Absolutely. Yeah. So guys, I really want to thank you, Muhammad, for,
thank you very much for
this. Yeah. So at this moment, I want to bring on board Benedict Tembo, who is joining us from Zambia. And I will ask Bronson if you can pull Benedict's presentation on. And Benedict will be talking about Zambia's fight for the broken man skull. Remember, we have also human remains that are stuck in Europe. We got a little sense of that about the chaga in Tanzania. But in this particular case, we'll be talking about the broken man. And Benedict will share his perspective from us. Benedict is a journalist with Zambia Daily Mail, and he is also a sports writer and editorial mentor. So Benedict, it's your turn. And if you can unmute Benedict, that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, and thank you, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Zambian experience. Before I begin, I want to give you historical background on how the British found themselves in Zambia. Zambia's colonization began in 1988 when the British South African Company secured mining rights in the area. Later, it became a British protectorate in 1899, being governed as part of Barrow's Land, Northwestern Rhodesia, and Northwestern Rhodesia. Then it became a protectorate of the United Kingdom fully in 1911 up to 1994. Then around that period, it also became a division of the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. This Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland included the now called Zimbabwe, which was called Southern Rhodesia. Zambia was Northern Rhodesia. Then Malawi was called Nyasaland. So it was during the mining operations in the central province in a town called Cabo in 1921. During the mining operations, when the broken hill skull was discovered. The discovery of this skull was published in a number of publications, and many publications that have been writing about this skull. This skull was exported to the UK by Mr. Rose McTinney, who was the managing director of the Rhodesia Broken Hill Development Company, to the British Museum, which is now known as Natural History of Museum.
Bronson, maybe you can move Bronson, you can move to the first slide. I think he's already on the first or second slide. The first.
Yes. So the export of the scow to the UK by the Rhodesian Broken Hill Development Company and the acknowledgement of the receipt of the scow by the National History Museum in 1900 should be construed as an acknowledgement of the fact that the scow came from northern Rhodesia, which is now Zambia. You may be interested to know that the majority of us, of course, that time I wasn't born, but Africans in northern Rhodesia, which is now Zambia, did not have a say in the export of the scow. Both the British South African Company, which ruled the territory in 1921, and the Rhodesia Broken Hill Development Company, which exported it, were both agents of the UK government.
Bronson, you haven't moved the slides.
Zambia has first ownership of the scow as it was discovered in this country, much as the UK claims universal ownership. You may be interested to know that Zambia only started claiming the scow in 1972. That was about 8 years after independence. Zambia got its independence in 1972. A subsequent attempt was made in 1974. That was 2 years later. And the British response was in June. The second attempt was in April 1974. And the British response was in June 94. That is 20 years later, arguing that the scow was donated and not illicitly exported. Of course, there's been a lot of inconsistency in terms of pursuing the scow, because after 1994, the next attempts were in 2000 and 2002. Since then, there have been bilateral negotiations, which are of intergovernmental nature, and the contention in Zambia that the UK should not relegate this claim to statutory institution, namely the Natural History Museum. The Zambian government has been sending representatives to the UK to pursue the UK government. Meetings with the Natural History Museum have been held. A recent government appointed a technical committee chaired by the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Tourism and Arts under the ministry which controls the museums in Zambia. You may wish to know that Mr. Lazarus Kapambwe, who is Zambia's ambassador to the UK, has been the lead negotiator. Although Zambia took her claim of the scow from the Natural Museum in the UK, she has never traveled to the UK for bilateral negotiations with the UK to pursue the same. This matter was later taken to an institution called the Promoting the Return of Cultural Property to its countries of origin, or restitution in case of appropriation, in 2018. However, we haven't been pursuing this matter consistently, and the failure has been due to financial constraints. Efforts have been made by various ministers to enable the standing committee of the German government to travel to the UK for bilateral negotiations and enable the committee to travel to UNESCO's Intergovernmental Committee for promoting the return of cultural property to its countries of origin. In 2015, Zambia was elected to UNESCO's Intergovernmental Committee for promoting the return of cultural property to countries of origin. Since then, a standard form concerning reports for return or restitution was submitted to UNESCO. Zambia made a presentation to the same committee to the 21st session on 31 May 2018. The United Kingdom made a presentation in response to Zambia's presentation. Out of the 22 parties to this committee, 22 states, out of the 22 states who are members of this committee, 15 have supported Zambia. The ICPRP made a decision that the Director General of UNESCO should assist in convening necessary meetings between the UK and Zambia aimed at resolving the matter. On May 23, in 2019, the first bilateral meeting was held at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. Zambia categorically demanded the return of the scar to Zambia. Both parties advanced reasons relating to the scar, with Zambia claiming it, while the UK wants to return it. Zambia has invited the UK for the next bilateral negotiations, but this has not happened. As things stand now, there's the urgent need to have the bilateral meetings with the UK so that progress can be made. It should be noted that Zambia should collect and compile all the necessary documentation, the arguments, the claims, and the discovery and the export of the scar to the UK. Going forward, the following should be done. Government should source money for the trip to the UK and France for the meeting. If resources are difficult to get, Zambia should invite the UK to Lusaka. Second, Zambia should involve the British High Commission in Zambia in the claim of the scar. Third, Zambia should be proactive and dictate the agenda of the meetings. That marks the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Benedict, for that, and sorry for the slow pace of moving the slides. I am told that the slide hung at a certain point and so on, but I think that you've really made the point, and it seems like the struggle for the Broken Hill man basically continues. And of course, the whole question of the funding, and you do say that there's need for resources to be made available to ensure that this happens. I can see that there is a big struggle to get the Broken Hill man skull back into Zambia. And this is like from 1921. It's amazing the ways in which the mining by the colonial regimes, their extraction of natural resources was also tied with the extraction of our cultural heritage, and so on. And I think that you've really made point very strongly, and just to also indicate that this story of the Broken Hill man will also be published in a special issue of Jahazi, which will be released in next month. So Benedict, I really want to thank you for sharing this story with us. It's a story that many people do not know, and yet it is an extremely significant story because of its value to the people of Kabwe, as well as the community that gave us, this person. So at this moment, I want to invite Juma to speak to us about some of the critical issues which he sees located at the National Museums of Kenya. Remember, we are treating this as a Pan-African agenda, drawing on experiences of people who are in practice, such as those that work in the national museums, but also journalists and academics. And so Juma sits in a very special place in terms of working with the museums with the team at the National Museums of Kenya to push some of these ideas forward. So Juma, if you could just tease out a number of issues that stand out for you, drawing on what your colleagues who have told us, from Egypt, from Uganda, from Zambia, if you could also just make reference some of those and also about the Kenyan situation, that would be really helpful. Thanks, Juma. Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Kimani, and our audience. It's a great privilege to share in this conversation. I think before I delve into the issues, I think I need to talk about a number of things that are emerging. One of them concerns resources. So I find it quite ironical that a continent as rich as Africa, when it comes to issues of great importance, such as our cultural heritage, we don't see commitment from our national government in support of this, and that the work that we are doing depends on the benevolence of the aggressors. And that brings a very big problem for us, those who are demanding for these things to come back. Because if you are begging for resources, including your own things, it limits your strength in terms of how you fund this. Now, the second thing that I want also us to think about collectively is the issue of funding, the structure of museum funding. I know for a very long time, museums have been defined as not for profit. But I think in the 21st century, and given the realities on the ground and the dwindling government funding, it's also good as we think about the return of our own cultural objects to relook at the model of funding museums and possibly look at them if we can run them alongside the model of social enterprise. Now, so that for me is something that listening to discussion from yesterday, I kept on asking whether our funding model for museums make themselves sustaining and also be in a position to receive and properly take care of these things. Now, when you look at the work that we have done as IIP over the last 3 years, which will form the basis of where we are at the moment, you find that we have written letters to institutions in the global north, mostly about over 100 letters. We have gotten response from about 32 museums based in 7 countries. And as we speak, we have a database with slightly over 33,500 objects. Now, all these objects are not criminal in themselves. And I know we were talking about community participation, which is something I'll also talk about because that is something that within the International Inventories Program, it was key in how we engaged with the database. So after receiving databases, we have been going out to community members to extract the section of that database which is applicable to their community, and for them to interrogate and come up with what they think in terms of what they see in that database. And I'll report before I go into the issues that we have the Nandi community from Kenya who have identified objects in a number of British museums that they will learn to bring back. The Pokomo community are keen to have their sacred drum back. And for a very long time, they have been writing letters to British Museum, which were never acknowledged. But thanks to IIP, one of the outcomes that happened is that one of the curators in charge of Africa has been in direct contact with the Pokomo king. So at least there's a conversation that is ongoing as part of this. And this will bring us to the next point, which I'll be talking about in terms of policy framework. Now, the Bukusu clan, the Bukusu community, have also identified objects that were plundered from them during the British punitive expedition of 1896, which was codenamed Chitambe and Lumboka punitive expedition, but it just turned out to be Chitambe and Lumboka massacre. So all those objects are at Pitt Rivers Museum, and the professionals from that community are working on a petition to present to the museum that are holding this. Now, as you see, communities are coming up with ideas of where their things are. They are utilizing this database to identify key objects that they need to be brought back. But as we all know, one of the things engaging with this museum, one of the things that is very clear is that if you lodge complaint to bring any object, the logistics of bringing that object fall squarely on your hands. So you have to make sure that you can be able to get it packaged and also get it delivered to your desired destination. Now, this is where government then comes in, because as we know, one, it will require a robust policy framework within a nation for a number of things to happen. So in Kenya, we are working in a policy framework vacuum. I know it will be talked about the steps that are being taken, but as we speak today, there's no policy framework that guides this kind of negotiation, even between communities and the holding museums as we speak. And government funding will also be key in this, because as we have just said, if the burden of repatriating that object rests with the claimant, then this should be a national government project in a way that it restores our dignity, that Kenya government can order KQ, for example, to work on the logistics of bringing these things back. We have just scratched the surface as part of this international inventories program. I realize that the Kenyan objects are spread not only in Europe and North America, but we have Kenyan objects in Australia. We have also gotten inquiries from people in South Africa who served in the colonial administration, but they're still keeping some of the families are still keeping objects that that left Kenya. So what that means is that there's also need for a national register of claims, so that communities with known claims can lodge their claims directly in this national register, which I hope the team will be working on, will come up with a better way of doing this. And therefore, communities can register this. But when you look at the database such as IIP, communities may not know all the stories about that database because it's a very voluminous document. Now, what then it means is that we need our academia and civil society organization to be involved in this, let them access this database, interrogate it, and help community members look at the processes through which these objects were acquired. Because you find that, for example, when you look at acquisition history of these objects, you will find an object that is registered to have gone to a museum in 1986, for example. When you look at that, from the face value, it looks fairly recent, and therefore it is not a suspect. But some of these things, these objects, they end up in museum in 1986, but they left the country in 1904. But what has happened is that the families that kept them, the soldiers that fought and then kept these objects, they inherit them within the family level until one time someone gets tired or gets bored with them and say, okay, what do I do with this? So they end up giving them out to these museums. So we need our academia, our civil society organization to interrogate the databases in more in-depth and help communities also in identifying objects that need to come back. And as my colleague Njeri Gashi had just singled out one object, a common thread that goes throughout this database is that there are so many sacred objects. I'm happy that we are seeing issues coming up in Uganda and in Zambia and in Senegal, across Africa and Egypt. Objects that were of ritual importance to communities were also highly prized. And therefore, by taking away these objects, the whole community kind of crumbled. Because when you look at the Pokomo community, without the drum, the kingdom could not survive, because that drum was the essence of the community. Everything within the community was centered around the sacred drum. And so these people studied us and they knew how to kill our spirit and also to kill our governance structure. Now, let us have a system in place that can register all these claims from community. Let us help the community members. Those of us who have access to this database, let us engage with them. And that's why through International Inventories Program, we created Object Movement Dialogue, which is a platform that gives communities, we tell them what we have in the database, but also give them opportunity to have a conversation with us and with themselves as a community on what should be their priority things. And we hope that once there's a robust policy framework with the government and all the relevant conventions signed, and funding availed for this, because I don't want to believe this narrative that in Africa, we don't have funds. I know all of us who are Kenyans, when you look at the Auditor General report here, Kenya National Audit Report year in, year out, there's money. It's just about, is our government prioritizing this? And Professor Kimani, my challenge to you is, next time you're having a conversation like this, kindly bring our parliamentary, our MPs on board, because you know Parliament is also critical in terms of allocating resources in government. Let us engage with our Parliament, our National Assembly, so that they understand the importance of this in a way that they can allocate resources to help us move everything forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juma, and I can assure you that we do take that comment very seriously because we are in the business of policy advocacy, and we are in the business of really trying to get action. I think that these initial stages was to build consensus within, within civil society, and then build the strategy to engage at the level of, of Parliament, National Assembly, the East African Community, and the African Union. And I think that this momentum that we are building, not just within Kenya, but also within the region and the continent, is a very, very important momentum, and it must be multi-pronged. So that we and also the importance of having clarity amongst ourselves in terms of what we should be pushing for. And again, thank you very much in terms of really helping us understand that communities need support to do the petitions, because the communities are looking for their things. Their things are scattered all over the world. But how do we get them to write those petitions and support them to write the petitions, and so on? And I think this should be really part of the work that we should be doing across the continent. So I want to thank you, Juma, for those comments. At this moment, I would like to again recognize a number of people that are in the room. I know that Helena is joining us all the way from Dakar. I think whether Dakar or St. Louis, Helena, really feel very welcome. And we have quite a few other people, Omar Balde from Tangier, and we have quite a few other people from different parts of the continent with us in the room. I can see Ban Moon is again with us from Abuja. I really want to thank you very much, colleagues, for turning up for this conversation. I want to ask Garnet, who has actually worked a little bit on some of these ideas, to maybe just make a very short comment, because Garnet, you have listened to this conversation, and you've listened to our colleague Mohanad from Egypt. And I noticed that you had a very interesting comment in the chat. Could you just maybe just say something around what you are hearing, a brief comment before I call on other people? And I know that we'll also be asking Kurewa to to give us a perspective along the way, and as well as other people. So Garnet, what is going on in your mind as you listen to this conversation? And is there something that is worth deeper reflection on? Garnet.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Kimani, and good morning, everybody. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to attend yesterday, but I've been able to attend today. And listening to all the conversations, I hear it said that what was taken away from Africa were things of value. What were taken away were things of value. And, whether it's from, the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, they took away, as Juma has just said, the thing that would represent the soul of the community. I was listening to a talk by Chimamanda, who was addressing, I think, a new museum opening up in Humboldt. And, she again talked about the taking away of, the ikenga, which, was part of a man's shrine in Nigeria. And of course, that totally killed the man, that destroyed the soul. And so, for me, when I hear this, and then I made a comment, I know about, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now, and I actually had it with me just now, on the table, because we've been working on it. And one of the things that this book actually talks about was that for the Egyptians, it really was important, to record the life of a person, because they believed in reincarnation, that, the dead lived on. And so, there was, from life you segued into death. And so death actually became even more important than life, because it signals immortality. And so when the British carried away, the symbols of this immortality, again, it was like taking away the ikenga. And I remember visiting the British Museum once, and I was really shocked to find, total reconstructions of the pyramids from Egypt. But I must say, I was also really surprised to find alongside the pyramids, a Kamba grave, so they didn't stop at just, Egypt, they came everywhere else and took away that link to the thing that would keep societies going. Now, for me, my discipline is literature. And I was, as everybody was talking, I was just remembering, there's this, again, I quote a British dramatist and parliamentarian called John Lylis. And he wrote a book called Euphus. And in it, he makes the famous statement, which I think a lot of us use, all is fair in love and war. And I think there's the other statement, by fair means or foul, which I think is attributed to Shakespeare. And the thing we forget at our peril, I always think, is that, when these people came to loot, okay, I mean, these people were on a mission of conquest of the continent. We're not having soft conversations around the return of spoils of war. These things were the spoils of war. And so the victor normally assumes ownership. We were a conquered people. And so even as we start to make, cases for restitution, what is our position? How do we view our position? And how do they view our position? Because if I have vanquished you in battle and I have taken my due, how then do we begin to have a conversation about restitution? I think these are some of the things that for me, I'm really hearing. And of course, I think it was Kiza Wilson who talked about, how things, of course, are taken to Oxford, the museum at Oxford, and of course, we also have them at Cambridge. But one of the other things that is taken, or one of the other aspirations, therefore, that was left on the continent was that the people themselves, we still aspire to go and add on to the knowledges of these institutions as being, whether it's part of our completion or whatever, but we are adding onto that stock and we are of value to the continent. I remember attending a restitution debate on African art in a global society at Columbia University. I think it was 2 years ago now. And, there was an African philosopher and scholar asked to comment on, the artifacts that, were being discussed for restitution. And he started off, and it was in a very gentle, almost, but very provocative, but almost jocular manner. And he said, for him, when he looked into the room, he could see African brains sitting in there as part of the West. And the question was, were we really thinking about what is actually happening? We might make debates about restitution of things, okay? But in terms of the resource of the continent, where does it actually sit? And of course, to bring it home in Kenya, in the newspaper this week, we've had, the whole issue of, the nurses, Kenyan nurses, for you who don't know, are being recruited to go and help, to work in the British system because of the pandemic. Okay, now, of course, we have a pandemic in Kenya as well, and we do have a shortage of nurses, but they're being taken to go and help with the British situation. And one of the things that happened was a lot of them, of course, they have to do a test, and they failed the language test. So in this week's newspaper, the argument was that no, they should be allowed to resit the test to enable them to go. And I thought, no, that is the wrong debate. We are sending away our resource at a time that we are more in need of that resource than the British. But the way in which we think about ourselves, for me, I think that is what is crucial. That is what is crucial. And if we can do that in this day and age, send away a vital resource at a time that we need it ourselves. When it comes to talking about antiquities, should we, bring the parliamentarians in the room? And the parliamentarians are the ones signing off our nurses. I think we have, whether we have policy or not, I think we have a long battle ahead. And that's all I can say. And I'd really, really like to thank our man from Egypt, trying to find his name. Mohanad, about Nefertiti's head. Thank you so much for reminding me about, what was happening, with Egypt, because of course a lot of the antiquities of Egypt are held elsewhere as international capital, not as local capital. And so I do thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Olunya, for these for those very important comments. And and I think that, as usual, you provoke us to think in a deeper way about these matters. You will see that I did make a comment about, if you take the view that colonialism itself was a crime against humanity, if you take that view, then there is huge responsibility that must be placed on the global north for the crimes committed against humanity, so that the looting of that was undertaken, whether one is talking about Ethiopia or any of these other countries that we have, were actually activities taken as crimes were being committed. And therefore, in my view, for instance, and I think that this view might be unpopular, in my view, the responsibility of returning these things should not be a burden of the governments, African governments, for example, or the communities themselves, but actually should be a burden that the global north ought to carry. So that is a Kimani Njogu position, which might not be extremely popular, but I think that we have to be able to argue that they need to take this as a responsibility on their part for crimes committed to the African people. But I have a lot of other people that I would like to get into the room to talk with us. I want to bring in, I want to bring in Ben Moon. I don't know if Ben Moon, you are still with us. In terms of what you are hearing today, in view of your own community in Nigeria, and whether it resonates with what your position is with NOC at. Ben Moon, if you are still with us, I don't know, I saw her a while back. I don't know if she's still with us, or might be having a challenge. Maybe as she comes in, maybe Kurewa, you can share with us a perspective on the framework that is required or is actually being envisaged in the case of Kenya, and then we'll move on to Kalundi, because Kalundi, I would like you to make a comment on, in view of what we have had so far. So Kurewa, if you can step in, and then we'll ask Kalundi to step in. Seem to be having connectivity issues. You have a connection problem. Try one more time. Is he having? I know he's in a very rural location. I can't hear him. I can't hear him.
Can you hear me?
Can you try one more time?
Can you all hear me?
Now we can hear you vaguely. Try one more time, and then maybe we'll try. Maybe Kalundi, you can step in as Kurewa organizes his connectivity. Kalundi, do you want to step in briefly for a quick comment? I think we also lost Kalundi along the way. Can we ask any comment? Okay, Kulewa, do you want to come in now, Abdikadir? I think Abdikadir is having a challenge with his connection. So I can take comments as we try to see how we can bring him in. Do you have any comments? You can raise your hand.
Yes, please, Prof.
Yes, Benedict, do you want to make a comment so far?
Yes, I want to make a comment on the presentation by Juma. I think Juma brought out very important issues around the resources and lack of commitment. So I'll sum it up by saying a lack of political will. Because you see, if you look at where the expenditure of our governments and where the monies go, it cannot compare to noble causes such as retrieving the broken human skull. But you see, there's no consistency in this area, and the downside has been, the high turnover of staff at the museum boards. This one starts the process. Tomorrow they're either retired or transferred. A new person comes in or new minister comes in. By the time they are learning about the broken human, their term of office has either come to an end or they are retired or transferred. So as long as this continues, will not go anywhere. You can imagine how long it has taken Zambia to do this. Yet, I'll give an example of our president. He was in Glasgow for the climate change conference. After that, he went to the UK to meet government officials and other people. He never raised this issue during the time we spent either in Scotland or the UK. He had just come back. He should have used those platforms he had there, addressing Zambians, addressing other people, talk about the broken human. So you see that there's actually no political will. You know, this subject comes up once in a blue moon. And the biggest problem we have in Zambia at the moment that you see, it is now, this issue is being pursued by civil society and not by government.
I think that we need a multi-pronged approach. Of course, sometimes the will is critical. We also need a lot of push from communities, and we need a lot of push from civil society as well as academia. I think that this multi-pronged and the media. I mean, you guys work
You're
in
right.
the media. We need to push.
The media, I think we've been asleep also. We need to wake up.
Yeah, yes, you do need. We do need to do that. Maybe
so that's why this platform is very important.
Yes, Benedict, I agree with you totally. Keep building this pressure. Do we have additional comments before I bring in the team to make final reflections? Any additional comment? Jerry, what are you hearing from? What are you hearing? Yes, Juma.
One of the things I also wanted to bring to our attention is that in a recent engagement with a number of museum directors in Germany, I did ask one key question. How many letters are they receiving from Africa petitioning them to repatriate objects back? And the answer was shocking because they said so far they are receiving none. And just a week before that, I think that's the first time that the British Museum got a more recent formal request from Nigeria. And when you look at within the Benin Dialogue Group, the Benin bronzes are spread all over museums in Europe. And so I was expecting that Nigerians have written letters of petition to all the museums holding their objects. I think it's high time that we find a formula of helping communities to write this petition to these museums so that even if no action is taken, it will be on record that museums are receiving petition from Africa. Which also leads to the other thing that Professor Kimani was talking about, the need to help communities draft this, because there's a museum in the United States, Fowler Museum in California, which came back to me and said, okay, look, we have Vigango, and these are the Giriama funerary statues, and because they were influenced by other museums that had repatriated their Vigango, and so they wanted to bring back, those Vigangos. And they need a formal petition from the community. And so while the other Vigangos did come without that formal petition, these other museums need a very formalized process where communities must write to them first before these objects can be moved back. And therefore within this forum, and I know Professor Kimani will talk about this on the sideline, it will be good to have a kind of a template which can then help community members who want to petition these museums in terms of bringing back their objects. I think that's what I wanted to bring to our attention.
Thank you very much. That not enough letters are being written by our communities to those institutions that are holding our staff. Maybe Kurewa, you are able to join us now, and then we'll bring in Purity.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Hello.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear. That's good.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think from picking up the discussion, I think first of all I wish to thank all the speakers for the for sharing that rich experience. I think one of the biggest elephants in the room, I think, is issues of finances, which is shared across. And in my view, I think, and we need to come up with a very good strategy. And that's what exactly we are trying to do here from the State Department of Culture and Heritage and the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Heritage in Kenya. We are in the process of putting together a multi-sectoral team that is composed of, from the and we are, in the process of coming up with a national strategy on repatriation. So that will also include lobbying for finances through the Parliamentary Committee on Sports and Culture, who are in structures. Besides that, we are also in the process of ratifying UNESCO Convention 1970 as one of the challenges that we environment. So that's those are the main that we're currently driving, and we hope experience. That's what we are.
Our brother Abdikadir is having a challenge given his location. I'm aware of the location. He's really in a very distant rural area, so his internet is a little shaky. But I think that the point he's made is that there is already work to push for the ratification of the various conventions that would then help with the restitution, and more specifically the 1970 convention, as well as I would assume the 1954 Hague Convention, and all those key conventions that relate to protection of cultural heritage. I can see a very important question that has been raised by Sarah on whether communities can, whether people of an African country, in fact, basically the question is, I wonder whether there can be legitimate claims made not by communities themselves, but also by people of an African country, even if the communities themselves are not keen on having their items returned. I don't know whether this is, whether anybody would like to pick this question and respond to Sarah. Is this something that Dr. Purity, maybe because I saw your hand and given your location, could you also, as you make your comment, see whether you can respond to Sarah's question on whether communities of an African, or members of an African country can make legitimate claims even when the communities themselves might not be making that claim precisely because of certain challenges that they might have, whether, for example, a civil society organization can step in on behalf of communities, for example, and do that. Purity.
Thank you, Prof. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, in fact, the reason why I raised my hand was related to maybe some of what is being asked here. And I'm glad that Abdi Kurewa, although we didn't get to hear him, because I would have really wanted to know where we are in terms of, because every day we keep talking about having a policy and a strategy. And that's why Kenya is not moving as fast as other countries. And I would have really wanted to understand, maybe even from someone who has successfully, or a country that has been able to successfully do it, has been able to do it, because when we interact even with some of our embassies abroad, they seem to be waiting for a direction from our government or for that policy and that strategy on how they can request for these things. And it's a similar thing even with communities. For example, I know the Pokomo have been making a lot of noise and requesting for that drum, which is within the British Museum. And every time they hit a dead end, because they are told that this is not coming from the government, it's not coming from the representation that should be. It should be a state-to-state negotiations and discussions. And even the question which is being asked here by Sarah, it's the same thing. And I would be glad maybe if you are able to organize for another forum where we can hear some of the success stories from some of the countries and know how they have really been able to do it. Because as much as we continue waiting for ratification of conventions, coming up with a policy, I don't know, a strategy, resources, people are moving, countries are moving and getting some of their things. Look at Ethiopia. I know Ethiopia, in the last discussions that we had, I think they said they had a policy, but is it the policy that made them get the items from Britain, or is it the negotiations? And these are some of the real issues that we need to deal with as a country, and I'm sure also other countries here are facing the same predicaments. When you talk to the British Museum, they say it has to be state to state, and because of the accessioning, I don't know, Parliament has to come in, and we are lost. We are actually lost because we don't know what are we doing or how should we be doing it. So if indeed we were able to come together as Africa, I know the AU is also discussing the same issue, but I don't know how far they have gone, whether they are going to have a policy for Africans. But in some of these cases, it's goodwill. And I think that is why most of these things are being returned, because it's goodwill. It's not because of a policy or a strategy. And I think this is where some of the countries that have not even been able to return to get some of their materials should begin. Let's start negotiating, even if there's no policy, even if there's no strategy, and see how far we can be able to get. Juma pointed out clearly that Kenya has been able to get a few bigangos. These are some wooden structures for some of the communities within the coastal region of Kenya. And it was just out of goodwill. But now what I'm seeing, like even negotiating with some of the institutions in the US, they are a bit hesitant as of now, because the issues of compensation have started coming in. And they wouldn't want to go that direction. So that's why they want state to state, country to country, with proper strategies and policies, so that then at the end of the day, they know, are we paying compensation? Whom are we paying to? Because if each and everyone is asking and requesting for these things, they are about to be a few issues which may come in. So probably you may want to have a forum where we can listen to some of these success stories, so that then we know how we can move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Purity. Before I call on Kiza and Muhannad to make a comment as we wrap up, yes, we did. I know, for instance, the case of Ethiopia, and we were hoping to listen to Tadesse yesterday, Shifaro, but of course, you know what's going on in Ethiopia now, so we couldn't get the benefit of that. I do know that they do have a national framework for restitution, and there is a team that is charged with that responsibility. But of course, some of the stuff that has been returned, including the Bible and all those other things that were taken, some of those are coming back as a result of other negotiations. So it is important that we build a pathway, even as we wait for government to enact the requisite legislation. I did talk with the director of culture, I think 2-3 weeks ago, about whether they are building a framework for Kenya, for example, and he did say that they are doing so. They are likely to be setting up a task force to get this thing going. But I think that, as usual, we need to build momentum. It's not enough to ratify the conventions or even have the framework because it can sit. But we do require the framework. We do require the policy direction, so that even issues of storage of whatever is returned becomes clear. and so on. So I agree with you totally. I think that going forward, we will be looking at also the success, sharing the success stories and strategies and so on, and also building a Pan-African direction. I'll also mention that we have reached out the African Union desk in charge of culture, and we did invite Angela Martins to the meeting. But I also know that because of what's going on in Ethiopia, it was difficult for her to join. So I think we just need to keep building the momentum. By this moment, I want to ask Kiza, as we wrap up this meeting, Kiza Wilson, what are you hearing? What comment can you, what are you hearing? And also Mohanad, what are you hearing?
Thank you very much, Professor. I really agree with speakers and other contributors who have said that we need a movement that is cross-cutting, that we have to bring in civil society, we have to bring in first and more, vital to bring in the community members to appreciate the fact that these things are important to them. I know over the years there has been a lot of brainwashing where artifacts are treated as articles of witchcraft. So we need to bring them on board. We need to get friendly forces in our legislative assemblies so that they can raise our voices in Parliament. And if human rights defenders, they needed a policy. What we did, what happened was that one MP was willing to move a private bill. So I believe if we do such, we can also get such MPs across the continent to start the policy part of it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Aweza for the opportunity to present today and to attend yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kiza, and we'll be reading your story again in Jahazi when it is published. Mohanad.
I think my colleagues made some excellent points, like Juma's point also about empowering local communities, and that we have to build momentum. And there are different ways to build momentum. It's not just we don't have to take just one approach. This is why I'm saying organization is key between different players and different, because we're basically building a support structure in place to be able to support different initiatives. It doesn't have to be like just one way or the other, like taking one route or the other. We can pursue different routes, and we can support others in pursuing their own routes. It's just, I believe that we can, and hopefully will be able to build momentum behind any movement for cultural restoration, as and like things that's like, since because it's a common recurring theme that basically how much colonialism affected us in that regard, in every regard. Like what Dr. Olonia said about, for example, the thing about like the ancient like Egyptian connection with death that actually continues till this day, past the modern religion divide, and how actually the colonials played on that. And I believe it's very important for us to band together as an African continent, regardless of any differences we might have in some issues, because I believe we need to start building momentum together. We need to start building an infrastructure capable of supporting any initiative to restore our culture and heritage.
Thank you very much, Mohanad. Thank you very much, Kiza, Mohanad, Tembo, Juma, colleagues, Abdikadir, everybody that has really made this possible. I think that the position that we have taken, at least at Traweza, is that the colonialism itself was a crime against humanity, that the empire building project was a crime, that and anything that was looted from Africa was looted in the act of committing the crime of building the empire for resource extraction, and that those resources were natural resources, cultural resources, and so on. And therefore, I think that it is important to take the battle back to those who stole, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that those who took things, who looted, can again be start negotiating on the conditions under which that which was looted needs to be returned. I think that you start by apologizing for stealing, and then you return that which you stole, and so on. And I think that when we have a unified position on this, and then of course we build systems, internal systems that allow the return to be smooth, then it becomes possible. But I think that a singular message of the imperativeness of this return is really key, and I can see that we do need to have that clarity, at least amongst ourselves, and I also think that working only at the national level is not enough. I think we need to build a Pan-African, lens to deal with issues. And I think that over the last couple of months, we have interacted with a lot of people who are keen on these issues. And I think that we need to take these issues to the next level. Of course, when the Pan-African lens is a lens because there are national particularities and action, and so that different countries might be at different stages. So we take the Pan-African lens, then we situate our national actions much more strategically, but with cross-referencing on each other, and so on. So I want to thank you. I think that we will continue exploring how best to move this forward, and this is just the beginning. I mean, I think that we are at a very important stage of building consensus on what needs to be done, and I have heard you about getting best case scenarios, getting success stories, listening to our colleagues in other jurisdictions, building the platforms in which petitions could actually be made, finding out where the resources, whether those are intellectual resources or human resources or financial resources, could actually come from, and so on. It must be multi-pronged, it must be multi-sectoral, but I also think that every change is driven by a team that is convinced that that is the right direction, so that the team kind of carries the vision once they have built the consensus. And I think we are building this consensus in terms of what needs to be done. So I really want to thank you and to say that we will be communicating with you further. For those of you who have contributed articles, these articles will be published in the next couple of weeks, and you'll be hearing from your editor. So thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you.